Hello everybody and welcome to the United Stand. The chart show is back. It's the last chart show before the World Cup, and I've got to say this is going to be really interesting because it's the toughest one I've ever done. With the loss to Villa last Sunday and then a bit of a bad half in the Carabao Cup game against Villa, there wasn't a lot of great or good performances to work off compared to the last few weeks. But we've done our top 10, get ready for it. And there's a bit of a shock there as well in relation to who was very high last week and is not even in the top 10 this week. We'll talk about that. But just a bit of topical news before we get into it. Apparently Cristiano Ronaldo didn't train ahead of the Fulham game, so won't play against Fulham. This is something I spoke about on the morning show, Saturday morning. I said I'd spoken to a Premier League footballer on Friday night, not a Manchester United player, and they'd said to me, watch out this weekend, there will be some really weird things going on because there are players who are playing in the World Cup who are really wary of playing in the World Cup and getting injured or something bad happening to them the week before. So there will be players who are not playing at full tilt, and that will allow some shocks to happen. And I think we've already seen that happen, haven't we? And you put yourself in Ronaldo's boots. Are you going to play against Fulham or put yourself forward to play for Fulham and tempt fate? Imagine if he played and, you know, broke his ankle or something. He would be like, I could easily have avoided that game. So, and I think there'll be a few players doing that. I think there'll be a few players playing who are a little bit, you know, mentally thinking about that as well. This is the stupidity of having a World Cup in the middle of the season. But of course, it weakens United tomorrow, doesn't it? It does. Anyway, let's get on with the top 10, the chart show. Top 10 United players of the week. Obviously, we give people a little bit of weight if they were doing well in last week's chart. We don't just, it's not a reset every week is what I'm trying to say. If you've got Casemiro, who was number 3 last week, we're not just going to reset it and do it top 10 for the week. You know, you do get a bit of credit for what you've done in previous weeks. However, I will say David De Gea was last week's number 1. He's not number 1 this week. He's not even in the top 10. So that can happen. You can plummet completely even from number 1. It's the first time I think it's ever happened. The reason it's happened is because he didn't play in the Carabao Cup game, and obviously we conceded 3 goals in the Sunday game at Villa Park, where I don't think De Gea played badly, but you know, maybe could have done a little bit better. So he's out of the top 10 this week. This week's number 10 is a new entry. It's Scott McTominay. Some people would say, what's the credibility of being number 10? Well, I think there's 18, 19 players that have played for United over the last 2 games. So, you know, better to be number 10 than to be not even in the top 10. Why have I put Scott McTominay in there? Look, I would agree that when he played at CDM in the first half against Villa in the Carabao Cup, it was not very good. I mean, Casemiro at CDM and McTominay at CDM, I would describe Casemiro in a musical sense as classic Gary Barlow. You know, very, very good songwriter, singer, you know, top class. Absolutely incredible, Mark. And then Scott McTominay as a CDM is like your cat squealing to come in at night, isn't it? I mean, it's complete, it's not music. But when he moved away from that position and moved more advanced, he smacked the bar with a really good shot from the edge of the box, and then he scored the goal from Gancho's cross. So I think McTominay just about creeps in at number 10. For me, it was going to be McTominay, De Gea, or Lindelof, and I just thought, you know what? Based on the week we've had, where we've conceded a lot of goals, let's go with the goal scorer. So I went with Scott McTominay there. So he's number 10. This week's number 9, Anthony Martial. Obviously, I think it's just good to have Martial back, especially with that Fulham game tomorrow. Do I give Anthony Martial loads of credit on performance? Not really, but I do give him, you know, credit in being back fit and not injured. And he did score a goal, all right. It was a tap-in. I don't think he played particularly amazing, but I just think it's so good to have Anthony Martial back for Manchester United, especially ahead of that Fulham game. He's clearly a very important player for Eric Ten Hag, and I think that the value of that will be seen. So look, just good and happy to have Martial back. As I said, this top 10 this week, it's not full of scintillatingly good performances. That's not going to happen when you got beat 3-1 by Villa and the first half was rubbish at Old Trafford in the Cup. So, you know, people will go, why is Martial there? Give me 11 really good performances and Martial's probably not there, but we are scraping the barrel a little bit this week. So Martial's in at number 9, new entry as well. Luke Shaw, last week Luke Shaw was number 7, so he's dropped 1 place to 8 this week. I think he was subbed off against Villa in the league, wasn't he? He was all right in the Carabao Cup, but look, defensively we've switched off this week. Are they tired? Yes. Are they fatigued? Yes. All of those things are understandable. I will still say the loss at Villa Park has so much to do with playing in Spain 2.5 days before that, and they're playing a team that's got a new manager and is up for it. So I will still say that, but Ultimately, we've got to judge the players on their form and their ability, and it has dropped in that defence, unfortunately. And looking at our defence over the last few weeks, most chart shows the top 5 has been made up of De Gea, Varane, Casemiro, Martinez, Dalot, sometimes Shaw. The defence has been very good, but this week it dropped a bit, didn't it? So Luke Shaw is this week's number 8. And again, Dalot, number 7 this week. He's dropped 3 places. Last week he was number 4. I don't think Dalot really did much wrong this week. Obviously, the own goal against Villa in the Cup, I think, was a bit unfortunate. But in general, I think he's a tired fullback who is in need of a break. And I think he's had a fantastic season for us. He's one of my favourite players of the season this year. I think if you take away new signings, I would arguably say that Dalot's been our best player, not including new signings. So, I mean, who's been better? I mean, De Gea, potentially. Rashford's been okay at times. Well, Rashford's been very good at times, to be fair. But Dalot's probably been the most consistent with De Gea. So, look, Dalot's had a very, very good start to the season, and he is this week's number 7, and I don't think there can be much complaints about that. A bit of a drop for Martinez, and I felt wrong putting Martinez at number 6. It really did feel very, very wrong. He's been in the top 2, I think, pretty much from the start of doing the chart show. So for him to drop from last week's number 2 to this week's number 6 feels really weird. But when you look at it logically, he has to drop because Villa was his worst game in a United shirt. And I know he got subbed off at half-time against Brentford, but I don't think he was massively bad in that half against Brentford. I think he was just the one who got, taken off. Against Villa, when you watch it back, he is fundamentally at fault for, or has a part in all 3 goals. The first one, he's running with Leon Bailey. The second one, he plays the pass that Luke Shaw gives the free kick up for. And then the third goal, it's his header that allows the Villa counter-attack. He just didn't have a good game. Tired, fatigue, loads of reasons for it. But I think as football fans, we've got to be fair in our praise and our criticism and constructive. And it was just a bad day at the office for many players last week. As I said, De Gea was number 1 last week in the chart show. He's not even in the top 10 this week. It was a bad day at the office, and it was a tired day at the office. And Martinez didn't play particularly well against Aston Villa. He didn't play in the Carabao Cup, did he? He only came on towards the end. So a bit like De Gea, Martinez has sort of dropped a few places because didn't really play in the Cup and had a bad game against Villa. But I mean, when we do season so far next week's show, what a player he's been. And I would say it quite comfortably, and you can get in the chat and tell me who's been your signing of the season for Manchester United. For me, you've got to go, it's between 3. It's between Martinez, Casemiro, Ericsson. I think viably you could say all 3. I actually think Casemiro's impact on the team is massively understated. I spoke to somebody, in fact, I'll talk about that Casemiro thing in a minute because we're talking about Martinez. But with Martinez, I think a lot of people would go with Martinez. Ericsson was free, which gives him a tick in the box, and he's been really, really good. But Martinez, the criticism he got coming here from, I've played the game, and it's all about the structure, those two especially, was ridiculous. It was naive. It was ignorant. Oh, he's too small for the Premier League and I've never watched him. He's too small for the Premier League and I've never watched him before. Anyway, I played the game. Martinez, too slow. And it's wrong. Can't pass. Rubbish. Absolute crap analysis. And he's been brilliant. So, yes, he has to drop this week to number 6. But, sometimes you will drop if you have a bad game. And that's just a bit of a bad week for Martinez. But I'm sure he'll be back refreshed and up for Fulham ahead of it. Hopefully a really good World Cup for him, really good. And I don't think people are thinking about that enough. Some of our players' value could go up massively from this World Cup, and Martinez is a player I'm really looking forward to see. Ericsson is this week's number 5. Last week he was number 8, so he's moved up 3 spots. Some people might say why? Basically because of the Villa game in the Cup. That was the substitute that changed the game for me. I think in the first half in the Cup, he was not on the pitch. You got Fred and McTominay there, just hitting long balls from the back. No creativity through the midfield at all. Ericsson comes on, and suddenly we're creating chance after chance after chance after chance. And yeah, the people like Gancho and Rashford get the credit for that, and Bruno, but none of those chances are happening if Ericsson doesn't come on the pitch. And it's not just because he's creating it. It's also because people see him create it, and Villa are trying to close him down, which creates space for other players. with all due respect, when you've got Fred in Ericsson's position, they're not worried about his passing and they're not worried about swamping him with extra players. But with Ericsson, they're worried about the passing and they're also trying to stop him from getting the ball, which creates space for others. So Ericsson, for me, I know it was only a cameo in the second half at Old Trafford, but it was a massive, massive eye-opener again to how important he is. But I would agree that before that, even last week against Villa, when we lost, and a couple of games before that as well, he has looked, again, a player that has been a bit out of form and a bit tired, but, you know, he was brilliant in the Carabao Cup, to be fair. This week's number 4, he was last week's number 9, so he's a high riser. He's a high riser. He's a skyscraper. It's Bruno Fernandez, number 5. Baby, I'm a firework. I don't know why I sang that. Bruno Fernandez up to number 4 this week. Again, look, this is where it's going to get a bit controversial and all over the place. There's not an abundance of good performances to go with. There isn't. They're just not there. And people will go, well, Bruno didn't even bloody play against Villa in the league. He didn't. And I don't think he was very good in the first half against Villa in the Cup. Off the right-hand side, I thought his crossing was abysmal. But as soon as he came inside into the number 10 position, he was really, really, really good. And I just think that, you know, Bruno, I don't get why people don't get this. I mean, if you watch the channel, you'll know I'm a massive, huge fan of Bruno Fernandez. And admittedly, I have been quite critical of him over the last few months. And I've been the same with Martial. But they are well known as being 2 of my favourite players. And it's just not in my personality to go, I really like that player. Now I don't. I hate you now. That's just not me. If I like something, you know, every time I go out for dinner, if they've got sticky toffee pudding at the pub, I'll have it. Like, you know, my Chinese order has always got beef chow mein on it. You know, my Indian order has always got tikka masala on it. And my fish and chips order has always got fish and chips. It is just, you know, I'm very loyal. And look at Ronaldo. You know, I'm very loyal to what I believe is good. So I'm a massive fan of Bruno, but he hasn't really been operating at the level I believe he should be. That made me a big fan of his. So that's why I'm critical. But I did feel in that second half against Villa, he was really, really good. And I want him to build on that against Fulham. So for me, he's this week's number 4. I will admit, Ericsson at 5, Bruno at 4. The next player I'm about to talk about, there is, you know, there is obvious debate as to whether they are right or not. But there are slim pickings this week as well. It's not been a great week for United, apart from that second half in the Carabao Cup, which is why the players in the top 5 predominantly are players that did well in that second half. This week's number 3 is the only player to hold place. He's the only player to hold face. His name is Casemiro. People might be going, why is Casemiro number 3? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he was man of the match against Villa last week. He was man of the match against Villa. He was probably the only player on that pitch who actually wasn't below average. And this, for me, is why I think if you were to say who's been the signing of the summer, Ericsson and Martinez probably win. But there is a big case to talk about Casemiro. And I was talking about this with somebody this week, and we were both in agreement. Who's had the biggest impact at Manchester United? Well, Ericsson's made us be able to play from midfield to attack, which is something we've not been able to do for years. Martinez has made us more aggressive and better at the back, but Martinez and Varane sort of did that together. When Varane's not there, we're not as strong at the back, no matter how good Martinez is, because a centre-back pairing is a pairing. And it doesn't matter how good you are individually, you have to operate as a pair. And without Varane, Martinez we're not as good, even though he is brilliant. Casemiro has changed that team. Factually, he is a CDM in his own right. It is his job to protect the back four, and his passing ability, I think many people have been surprised by it, even though you shouldn't be for what he did with Real Madrid for years. But most important is that if you look at Man United before Casemiro came in, or you look at Man United even in that first half against Villa, we're operating around 50% possession. We are. That's what we were doing. Casemiro comes in and you're north of 60%, and that's just by bringing Casemiro in. He has changed the way we play. I think we've almost got Casemiro in and moved on and gone, yeah, we've got Casemiro now. But it wasn't that long ago when we weren't getting hold of the midfield. And we weren't getting hold of the midfield for the last 18 months. Casemiro's come in, and look, last season, Norwich would play us and think we've got a chance of winning that midfield battle. Suddenly now, that's not the case. So I think Casemiro has been fantastic. And he holds on to number 3 this week because he actually did play well against Villa. Last week against Villa, it was like Casemiro against 3. Ericsson had a bad game. Donny had a bad game. Casemiro is like 1 against 3. So he's been a brilliant signing, and he holds on to number 3, which means this week's number 2 is last week's number 6. It's Gancho. What a week it's been. Some people would say he should be number 1. You might not be wrong when you look at who is number 1, but obviously my number 2 this week is Gancho. I don't think he did particularly bad against Villa. Remember, he did play in that game. I mean, he's an 18-year-old being thrown into a big game away from home. He's just played against Sociedad. I don't think his role in that game was particularly poor. It's a free hit when you're throwing someone in like that. And as fans, you can't go, Gancho was shit against Villa. You can't do that because he's being thrown in to a situation he shouldn't be in. But obviously with the injuries, he has to be used. He's in form. I don't think he was particularly bad in that game. But I thought in the Carabao Cup, he was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant when he came on. You know, he's up against, I think Ashley Young was at right back first, and then Matty Cash came on. And every time he got the ball, he responded to that Old Trafford atmosphere. Superb, delightful ball to Scott McTominay, which just shows different layers to Gancho. Yes, he can run at people. Yes, he can score a goal. Yes, he can do the little 1-2s, close control. But he can also whip a really good crossing. So he's got that multitude of talents that really should set him on the road to who knows where. I mean, let's not label it. I don't want to put a label on what he can become. But look, thoroughly deserves number 2 this week. He's been the bright spark of the team with all the injuries we've had to Sancho and Anthony. They've almost been forgotten in many ways. I mean, we need Sancho and Anthony back, but Gancho coming in and grabbing that opportunity, that's what it's all about, football. I look at some of our players, and over the last 30 years, sometimes a chance just presents itself because of injury and you've got to grab it, and he certainly has done that, and really, really deserves his place at number 2 this week. And I hope he starts against Fulham, because we've seen him score in Spain, we've seen him play well at Old Trafford. If he can go away from home in the Premier League and start playing well, then that is a mentality king at 18 years of age. So and I must just say as well, I know there was a slim chance of him being called up to Argentina for the World Cup. I'm actually glad he's not. Ten Hag mentioned this on Thursday night as well. It would have been amazing if he had been called up, but he's had so much happen to him. He's training with Messi, he's training with Ronaldo, he's making his debut for Man United, there's loads of interest in him. I think that this next few weeks with Ten Hag at Old Trafford, Carrington, building towards the second half of the season, having a bit of a breather is absolutely right for an 18-year-old. I think if he goes to the World Cup, it's a roller coaster. You know, there's going to be some burnout at some point just from sheer emotion and what's going on. So I think it's beneficial for him, even though he might not feel that, and it's certainly beneficial for United. So this week's number 1, and look, he could have been number 2. You might want to put Gancho there. It's up to you. Get in the comments. But my number 1 this week is Marcus Rashford. I think he almost deserves it by default. I thought the second half when he... I think I actually gave him a 6.5, but... when I watched the second half back, I think I just had so much fatigue from the first half. I think I gave Bruno a 6.5 as well, and actually they both were better than that. Rashford, really, it's not been his best week. For him to be number 1 reflects the week Man United have had. There's no way he's had a good week. He's had better weeks. Was he any good against Villa at Anfield? Sorry, not at Anfield, Villa Park? No. Was his first half in the Carabao Cup very good? Not really. I think he gave the ball away, leading to one of Villa's goals, if I remember correctly. But there is such a big difference in Marcus Rashford to last year, and I still think that the critics are right. I still think there's rough edges to his game, but I do feel that this number 1 is a culmination of his start to the season, where we've mentioned a low and he's been consistently in the top 5 a lot of the time, and maybe Rashford hasn't been there, but his start to the season has been very, very good. And it's been very consistent. Remember, he's had an injury, but he got back. He started well, he got injured, he came back, and he's done well. He's sort of been floating under the radar, which is weird for Rashford, because you get Sky and even the other night giving him man of the match when he probably didn't deserve it. So he'll always get the credit from the media. But I think in the fandom, which is the real opinion that matters, I think in the United fandom, it's a bit of a split. I don't think he gets enough credit that he deserves, and sometimes he gets a little bit more credit than he deserves, but I think he does deserve number 1. I think he has been consistent by his level, and people will be going, oh, whatever, consistent. But look at the last 18 months of Rashford before this season. People were writing him off. I was saying it might be time for him to go. That's not going to happen. He's going to sign a new contract. And we need to hope that these glimpses that we are seeing in the first few weeks of the season continue, hopefully into the World Cup and beyond to the back end of our season. Because if we can get the Rashford back of 2 or 3 years ago, which was, I remember before we bought Bruno and Ronaldo and Varane and Casemiro, Martial and Rashford were my 2 favourite players because they got me off my seat. Exciting players. So if we can get that Rashford back and we can get that Martial back, then we're laughing. Because I remember saying, and the tweet's probably out there, about 4 years ago, I said that Rashford and Martial in 4 years' time would be the 2 best players in England and they'd be Man United players. And I was wrong because the development of Solskjaer and Mourinho was crap. I now feel that they've lost years, they've become injury prone, but if Ten Hag can get those injuries stopped and give them the development they should have got 3 or 4 years ago, we really could have a couple of players on our hands. So, look, I feel Rashford's earned it over a combination of weeks and a really good last half an hour against Villa. He's my number 1 this week. So make sure you smash a like on the video. Give your comments in below. As I said, topical Fulham tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Apparently Ronaldo didn't train, so we'll be doing it without Ronaldo. But thanks everyone for watching. Get your comments in below. A difficult week to do a chart show, but sometimes in a difficult week, you get to, delve and think and, look at previous weeks as well. I think that's what we've done. Thanks everyone for watching. Smash the like on the video. Subscribe. I'll see you all in a bit.